Hi everybody, welcome to the show. Hello everyone, welcome back to our channel. My name is Amanda and welcome to Raising A to Z, this inspirational and informational YouTube channel where we talk all things homeschooling with me, a former teacher turned homeschooler. Today we are doing something a little bit different. We are going to compare homeschooling and distance learning. Before we do that, if you like this video, don't forget to subscribe and click the bell so you get notifications when we put out new videos every Monday. Unless you've been living under a rock, COVID has affected your life in some way, shape, or form. And one of the biggest ways it's affected the lives of millions of families and parents and children around the world is through education. For a lot of parents, sending their kids in person is just not an option. Their children are immunocompromised. They have immunocompromised people in their family. They don't feel it is safe. Or like we have family members who just decided that this year it's just not worth it for their kids. When their kids can't play with each other, they can't share materials, they have to stay so far apart, all the restrictions that are in schools right now, they're just finding that it would just make more sense and be a lot more fun and engaging for their kids to not be in the classroom and be at home where they can learn with their own things and their own stuff and interact kind of on a little bit more normal basis. And so for those families who have decided not to use in-person schooling, they are basically left with two options: distance learning or distance ed, depending on what your board is calling it, and homeschooling. And while they both technically take place in the home, they're very different. And I want to make that very clear that distance learning and homeschooling are two incredibly different things. And there's going to be a group of people who distance ed really works for and a group of people who homeschooling really works for, and vice versa. It's not going to work for others. I just want to let you know that homeschooling is a great option, especially if you're finding that distance learning isn't working. And I say that because in a lot of the homeschooling groups that we're in, we are finding a lot of parents who are distance learning who think that they're homeschooling, and they're incredibly frustrated with what is happening. They're frustrated with the technology, they're frustrated with the amount of hours their kids have to sit there, they're frustrated with setup and watching their kids learn and what their kids are learning, and it's being eye-opening to see too what their kids are learning. And that's leaving them a little bit frustrated and starting to look at homeschooling as maybe a better option. Before we get into this, I want to say that if you are choosing distance ed, I commend you. I think it is much harder than homeschooling. I think it is the more difficult choice, just from my experience with homeschooling and as a teacher and our experience with State Band teaching online learning. Distance learning is so much harder than homeschooling. And it's harder on your kids, and it's also harder on the teachers. Random note, there are teachers out there who are phenomenal at doing the online learning stuff, but I don't think you guys really understand how much work and energy goes into being on camera all day, especially to keep the attention span of kids. It is exhausting, and they are doing it having just been thrown into it a month ago. So kudos to teachers who are teaching it. Kudos to you if you are picking it. Just thumbs up. Homeschooling and distance learning, what are they? So distance learning or distance education is essentially a COVID-based response to learning. This means that it is relatively new, especially in the format that they're doing now. Most school boards were not even aware they were going to need a distance learning option prior to COVID, ever. It was not on their plans. And the distance learning that they're doing right now that started this fall was pretty much just dropped in their lap last minute. So there's a lot of people, teachers and principals and school boards, who are scrambling to figure out the best way to deliver this program, to teach this program, and to make it something that will work for families. There's also things that I need to tell you, that a lot of distance ed and the rules and requirements and all that distance ed, we like to say it's coming down from the ivory tower. It is basically coming down mandated from the Ontario government, where we live. It is coming down from the politicians, many of whom have never set foot in a classroom and have no idea what teaching a group of kids is really like. And so there's things that they're implementing that hypothetically, in theory, could work. Maybe it might work with adults, but even then, sometimes it just doesn't work, especially when you're talking about kids. And so when you are choosing distance learning and distance ed, basically what you are doing is you are still registered with your school and your school board, and the school board is providing you with a teacher digitally, as well as curriculum, what worksheets you're going to be doing, and the assessment is all done by your teacher. And so you personally don't have to teach the curriculum, you don't have to teach the lesson yourself, but you are still in charge of making sure that your child is present, that they're on time, that they take the breaks when they are told to take the breaks, that they're not taking breaks when it's not break time, and that they are engaged in doing the work. So when I was a teacher, teaching was only a small part of the job. The rest of it was always making sure that the kids were doing what they're supposed to be doing and supervising and making sure everyone's safe. Basically, you as a parent are still doing that part. The teacher is doing the assessment and lesson giving section of the day. It's important, and I want to make this very clear, that when you're doing distance ed, because it is coming from the school board, they are making all the decisions. They are deciding what is being taught, how it's being taught, when it's being taught, for how long it's being taught. And they're coming into your home essentially through your computer screen to do that. That's not the case when it comes to homeschooling. So when you are homeschooling, you are basically opting out of school. You send a letter of intent to your local school board. They withdraw your kids. I recommend sending it by email, because basically as soon as they receive it, you're done for the year. And then you are free to homeschool your kids how you see fit. So you can find, there are literally hundreds of curriculum options out there. If you're new to homeschooling, I recommend you only pick 2. We have a whole video on, like, if you're new to homeschooling, top tips for new homeschoolers. You can find that up here. Definitely check that out if you're new to homeschooling. But pick a curriculum or 2 and start getting into that, and find a routine and a schedule that works for you. The nice thing about homeschooling is the freedom. You have so much freedom when you are homeschooling. You get to pick what your kids are going to learn. You can pick the books that you're going to read. You can pick the math program and manipulatives and activities that you're going to do. You can pick if you're going to skip a day, or if you're going to start late. Like, you can make it fit your family and how you're going to learn. I know some parents who, are using an online program for their math, and then they're doing like a written paper kind of program for their language. It works. That's what works for them, and that's how it works. Like, that's fantastic, because it's what works for their family, and they're picking how to learn. It's not just being told what they need to do. Homeschooling can be labor intensive if you are basically trying to make everything yourself, and plan everything yourself. But you can get programs that have kind of like your lessons outlined for you. Basically, it tells you what to do, what to teach, what to say, even some of them. It has multiple lessons or activities that you can do, and do them repeatedly until your kids get them. So if you are new to homeschooling and you're looking for a program, I highly recommend you look for one that has a teacher's manual or teacher's kind of accompaniment or parent's guide, and just jump in. Try 1 or 2 subjects and see how it goes, and continue on from there. Obviously, distance learning and homeschooling have their pros and cons. It's straight up. Everything has their pros and cons, right? So some of the pros of distance learning is that you are not responsible for your kids' learning. You're not responsible for, providing the lessons and learning everything you need to learn about that topic. It's a good option if you are both working full-time or working from home and you just can't put that time into it, or there are people who just are not interested in homeschooling their kids. That's fine. It's not for everybody, right? Some of the cons that you do need to be aware of is that it is many hours in front of a screen. Some people I do know are opting out of the synchronous learning, but from what I've been hearing and what we know from our school board is that a lot of school boards are requiring a valid reason before you can opt out of that. Anything from, an IEP or very poor or no internet connection, like, you have to have what they deem a valid reason in order to opt out. That's just kind of how it is right now. I know that in our board it is, and I think it's across the board for Ontario, is kindergartners are doing about 3 hours of online learning a day. whereas kids grades 1 and up are doing 4.5 hours a day. And when you're doing this program, it is Monday through Friday. You have to log on when they say and log off when they say. They are using programs that track if your kid is actually there. And they're telling you when your kid can take a break and when they can't take a break, and when your kids can have lunch and when they can't. Even some of them have rules about what your kids can wear while sitting on their couch. So just things to be aware of. Pros and cons of homeschooling. The cons are you have to find curriculum. You do have to, it does have a small cost. You can't do it for free. It's just a lot of more piecing it together. But there is a small cost associated with homeschooling. No, you can't get it back in your taxes. We'll do another video on that because that is a whole nother story. But the nice thing about homeschooling is you have so much freedom to pick what you want, what your kids are interested in, follow their passions and play to their strengths. So if your kid they're really good with hands-on learning, you can find a math program that is almost entirely hands-on. If your kids are really into rockets, you can do a rocket study unit. And that can be your science component. Like, you can pick and design a curriculum and an education program that's going to fit your kids and your family. You can teach subjects as a family. Like, besides math and even most of the language you could teach as a family. But really, besides math, you can teach almost any subject as a whole group. And the kids who are younger will pick up what they pick up, and the kids who are older will pick up more and more information and dive in deeper. It'll work. It will work in the long run, and you can teach kind of like one lesson to multiple grades. You also have the freedom to decide on your schedule. You have the freedom to say, we're going to start at 9 a.m. or we're going to start in the afternoon at 1. I know some people who love afternoon homeschooling, or they homeschool in the evening because they are working during the day. I know some people who, only homeschool 5 days a week. We, in particular, do workbook 3 days a week. And the rest of the time, we're finding other things to do that are not seated work. That's just how we work, and we have that freedom to pick that. We also have the freedom to skip a day. Like this week, it's supposed to be really rainy. On the one day when it's going to be nice, you can guarantee we're going to be outside instead of doing workbook work, even if it is a workbook day for us. We have the option to skip it, and that's great. We don't have to report that, today we're opting out of math today, or we're only doing 1 page instead of an hour. We have that choice. The other thing that is really important, I think this is a big selling point for people who are interested in homeschooling. Homeschooling takes a lot less time. It takes a lot less time than in-person learning. It takes a lot less time than distance learning. Most homeschoolers are doing anywhere from 30 minutes to 3 hours a day. 3 hours kind of being at the top end, usually high school aged kids. That's kind of what you're looking at. Younger kids are doing anywhere from 30 minutes to an hour, hour and a half. And the nice thing is that can be spread out throughout your day. It's not, you get to decide when the breaks are, you get to decide how long the breaks are and what you're doing in your breaks. And so you have that freedom of learning and how long and when and what style you're going to do. And that's the great part about homeschooling. So when it comes to distance learning versus homeschool, we get this is the big concern, is what happens when all of this is over? What happens when we decide that the pandemic is over and that our kids are ready to go back into the classroom? We want to send them back in the classroom. What is going to happen? It's relatively simple. Your child will be placed into a grade according to their age. That is how it is in Ontario. They will be placed according to their age. There is no assessments, there's no reporting or guidelines. It's just by their age, by their birthday. And so that's where they'll be placed. They don't get held back, they don't get moved forward, just by their age. And then the other question that we get a lot of is like, well, what if they're behind? What if we didn't finish all of grade 2 science or all of grade 2 math? Well, that's why you have teachers. If your kids are going back into the public school system, teachers are trained to make it all happen in the end. They're trained to bring kids up to grade level and to work with them to help them fill in whatever gaps they're missing in their learning, if they're missing gaps. And I say if because a lot of people don't realize how topical education in public schools is. There's a lot of leeway into how and what a teacher is going to be teaching topic wise, depending on the subject. kind of outside of like math. Math is pretty structured. Even science is pretty structured, but it's very topical and you can kind of just pick units here and there. But like the teacher is deciding what book they're reading. The teacher is deciding what novel study they're doing. The teacher decides what unit they're going to do for social studies. So I might choose, as a teacher, I might have chosen to do like medieval times and castles, whereas the teacher down the hall who's teaching the same grade as me might decide to do the Vikings or Egyptians. Like that is the choices that the teachers have because it still fits the criteria of a pre-Confederation society. So, maybe your kids want to learn about like ancient China or Greek and Roman societies. That still falls under the umbrella of what is being taught for that age. So a lot of it's topical. And then I always ask, like, do all kids need to know this? Like, if your kid accidentally misses learning about photosynthesis, is that going to detrimentally affect them for their entire life? No. If they need to learn it, they will learn it later on. But if they don't learn it, most kids are going to be fine without learning the order of the planets. Like, they'll be okay. Basically, in the end of all of this, I'm just here to say that if you are finding distance education to be stressful, to be exhausting, it is not working for you, you can't get the technology to work, you're just frustrated and you're done, homeschooling is a valid option. Homeschooling could be a great thing for your family. And if you have questions and you want more information, leave a comment below, send us a DM. We're on Instagram and Facebook. We respond to everyone. And not only us, but there are a ton of other homeschoolers out there. There are homeschool forums and groups, and we're all willing to, pitch in and help parents, especially in this difficult time. I think that's one of the things that's really come out of this pandemic. It's one of those silver linings is we're really learning to help each other. And I think that's kind of a cool thing. So if you are choosing to homeschool or you're choosing distance ed, good for you. I commend you as a parent. If you like this video, again, subscribe and click the bell. If you want to talk to us or follow us along on our homeschooling journey, follow us on Instagram and Facebook where we post daily tips, tricks, what we're doing, activities. And if you really want to, you can sign up for our email list where we send all kinds of stories, anecdotes, resources, freebies, and every now and then we also throw in a sale for some of our books or planners, as well as we do some giveaways. Thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you guys next time. Bye!